Okay, please call the roll, Sheree.
Okay.
Alderwoman Davis, Alderman Vaccaro,
Present.
Alderwoman Howard, Alderwoman Hubbard,
Present.
Alderwoman Murphy, Alderwoman Spencer, Alderman Muhammad,
Here.
Alderman Oldenburg,
Here.
Alderwoman Boyd, Alderwoman Clark Hubbard,
Present.
and Chairman Palmer.
Present.
At 6 present, you have quorum.
Thank you very much, Rita. We will excuse the absent aldermen for necessary absence at this time. I believe a couple of them will be arriving late. There's a lot of meetings going on at this time. And we have the minutes present from last meeting. If you like, I would recognize a motion to approve the minutes of our May 15th meeting.
Mr. Chairman, I move that we accept the minutes for the last Ways and Means Committee hearing on May 15th
And 16th.
and 16th.
Thank you. Is there a second? Thank you. All right. With that, we're going to move forward.
I would like to say, unless you have an objection, I'm fine with previous roll.
I know we only done previous roll for a roll call. We haven't done it for a vote yet. If we
I
do a
think
roll call vote for...
I think it's up to the chairman. I think there's been an argument either way.
Yeah.
Because I have to leave, but I want to vote on all.
If we do, let's do a roll call for approval of minutes. That will give us a previous roll call vote then. All right?
Okay. And I'm fine with previous
Okay,
roll.
thank you.
And if something were to come up, if
I
somebody would
appreciate
grab me,
that,
I'll
sir.
come
Thank
right
you.
back.
Sheree, please do a roll call for the approval of minutes.
Alderwoman Davis, Alderman Vaccaro,
Aye.
Alderwoman Howard, Alderwoman Hubbard,
Aye.
Alderwoman Murphy, Alderwoman Spencer, Alderman Muhammad,
Aye.
Alderman Oldenburg, Alderwoman Boyd, Alderwoman Clark Hubbard, Chairman Palmer.
Aye.
That's 6 aye votes.
If
Thank you very
something
much.
were to come, please call me back.
Thank you, Alderman. We have 3 bills coming up before us that are companion bills. We have Mr. Talby Roach from Metro. Is it Metro? Bi-State Development. Right. I grew up with it being Bi-State. And Board Vote 43 is what we'll start with, which is sponsored by myself and President Reed. Mr. Roach is the intelligence behind this, so we'll let him describe it. And it's in regard to the Transit Sales Tax Trust Fund account number 1. Please continue.
Thank you, Chairman. Good morning, and I want to thank everybody of the committee for their time. We have prepared a brief presentation, which is being handed out to you right now. And this goes over the fiscal year 2020 capital and operating budget for Bi-State. This budget is supported, of course, through our 3 funding partners, including the City of St. Louis, and that's why we are here today, and that is the board in front of you. But just briefly, if I want to introduce myself, first of all, I started at Bi-State as the new president and CEO as of January the 2nd. So I am new to the role, and we're trying to move transit along and move it into what is the future of the city. So I invite any comments from you as far as policy or any concerns as far as how the system works. But with me today, I just wanted to point my colleagues to the left here. Of course, Lou Hamilton is our consultant with the City of St. Louis, but also I have here Chuck Stewart, my executive vice president, and of course Larry Rubarski, who is director of budget, and of course Kathy Cleaborn, who was the former CFO with Bi-State, who she's so good we couldn't let her go for a little while. So anyway, but in the interest of time, I'm going to move through this presentation, which is in front of you. And if you have any questions, I figured I would handle those at the end.
And this presentation basically covers all 3 bills, is that correct?
It does. Okay. And so there's a funding breakdown of the bills at the end of the presentation. Okay? So just to move along, of course, this presentation is oriented more towards what are the Missouri facts, and of course, we have the service area in front of you on slide number 2. Of course, we go throughout the Missouri region, and really I wanted to talk to you a little bit briefly about the realities of what has been going on since I've been at the helm. Quite frankly, that has been a focus on security and fiscal responsibility. one of the issues that I've tried to attack right off the bat, and I would point you actually to slide number 4. So when I walked in the door, we had a budget trajectory that's represented by the slanted line in the linear, and we had a current request of $318,370,000. Unfortunately, that just did not. This trajectory was something that we just didn't see as tenable as far as our funders were concerned. The city of St. Louis and the county and St. Clair County. So right off the bat, I challenged the staff to level our budget out. And that is the budget that we are presenting to you today. If you notice on that chart is the red line, which represents essentially a fiscally flat budget from FY19 to FY 2020. And the reason is we want to bring financial stability to the organization and then look at what are the service changes that will be associated with transit in St. Louis. And so I hope to garner your support of that movement, and that's been done over my brief tenure there so far and has been the basis of our staff working very hard. What I do want to point to is we are about to contemplate what is Metro Reimagined. So we have a system which has essentially been designed in the 1990s. We need to look at a system that is around for the 2020s. So part of that is redesigning the bus system and, for instance, redesigning, the security paradigm that we have in Metro right now. And I'll be very honest with you, it's not good enough. We need to do a better job. And that's one of the focuses that have been, one of my primary focuses is a emphasis on safety and security and better service and connectivity. One thing that you'll see a little later in some of our budget breakdown is labor contains really almost 65% of our operating costs. What does that mean? That means we're in a service business. So I should be operating it as if it is a service business. Think of relentless customer service. And so we need to be looking at that in all aspects of our business. We also have had some successes. The St. Louis Regional Freightway, which is part of our business enterprises, has been very successful at moving up that important economic paradigm in the region. And we continue to move that along. And as a matter of fact, we are a sponsor of the current Freight Week, which is going on, a conference in downtown St. Louis, which brings the shippers and carriers from throughout the country and focuses them on the important aspects of what St. Louis regionally brings to that industry. Very quickly, moving to slide 7, is essentially an FY 2020 statement of activity. What I would point out to you is the focus point for us is at the mid-level, the gray or blue highlight area with 2 stars. We focus on operating expense as our pivot point because those are the costs that we can't control. We only have limited to no influence on what interest expense or other expenses are. So obviously those are represented in the bottom line, but I always try to get staff to pivot from that point because those are the numbers that we can control. One issue that does kind of cloud things is if we go to slide number 8, as you may say, the budget that was approved in 2019 actually included a regional security enhancement of $20 million. Although that was passed budgetarily, it was not implemented. So unfortunately, it makes it a little complicated with how the bottom line numbers are. But again, I want to focus everyone that we have achieved a flat budget from 19 to 20. And that is reflected in the highlighted portion there. If I could move you to, for instance, what our fundamental revenue breakdown is. So then we're at slide 9. And of course, the lion's share of our funding are through our 3 funding partners, St. Louis County, St. Clair County Transit District, and then of course the City of St. Louis. Right now we're projecting those funds to be $36.6 million, or basically 11.2% of our revenue. That is the fundamentals in cost. Then again, moving on to slide 10, if you notice, our biggest cost is compensation. And that's always going to be the case with roughly 1,600 operators. Labor is always going to be the active cost contained in a transit business. If we want to move just to some of the highlights of the key point, of course, one of which is that there is a decrease in all kinds of different costs, but there are some increases associated with fuel and that we cannot control. So therefore, in getting the $20 million cut, which I implemented, we did have to reduce some positions. So there have been roughly 70 positions eliminated by state, both at the executive level moving all the way down to mid-management. And we've completed those as of last Monday. The fare structure remains the same. We have done a modest sales tax revenue assumption of a 1% raise for the county and the city just for projection purposes. And of course, the third funding partner, St. Clair County Transit District, they always fund 100% of their costs, as the formula in Illinois is vastly different than it is in Missouri. Then, of course, there are some federal formula funds that are reflected here. They're typically called 5307 formula funds, having to do with urban support. And most of that is dedicated to rolling stock. However, we do move a modest amount over to our annual operating budget, right around $16 million. So, if I move you to slide 12, some of the important issues are that, of course, that we kept a level budget again. We also then have rollout of Metro Reimagined, so a service redesign of our bus system that will be coming in fall of 2019. Although I did do a $20 million budget cut, there is one exception to that. The public and, of course, our policymakers, which includes this room, have been telling us they want a little bit more of a focus on security and enhancing security, and we've heard that. So with one exception, budgetarily, we have added to the security side of the budget. So roughly $1.7 million off of FY 2019. Then we also reduced staffing, as I mentioned, roughly 70 positions or 3%. And then we had some modest reductions in casualty and liability expenses, which are reflected in the numbers you see there. Then simply moving to what's happening in transit, in other parts of the country. So I move you to slide 14. So one of the things that we're proud of at Metro is that when we compare our performance indicators to other parts of the country, we are on par with our peers. And that's reflected in here. Of course, some of these are kind of strange metrics, but operating cost per revenue mile is one of those, and we're extremely competitive in that area. Also, and that first slide was in the bus area. In the second slide, or slide 15, is a light rail peer comparison. This also is what I would call an extraordinary number, especially since we have been in operation in a light rail since 1993. Now, we do have 4 tranches of light rail vehicles, and the first tranche is getting set for renovation, and so we're starting, and that is contemplated in part of the capital budget, which we're going to get to shortly. Then moving on to slide 16, you notice the operating cost per revenue mile. This is a key metric in not only in how the rolling stock works, but also in system design. And we actually hope to increase that. We are rolling out and have a plan to submit to the federal government for some electric vehicles. We have submitted under an FTA grant, a NOFO, where we're asking for 16 electric vehicles to try that technology. We have roughly 400 buses in our fleet, so 16 is actually a good pilot number. So that is one of the one of the plans that we are contemplating. If I can just talk a little bit about ridership. So moving on to slide 16, it is absolutely accurate that some of our fundamental ridership has been eroding, and we need to look at that. And that's one of the purposes for looking at Metro Reimagined and being more aggressive as far as security is. We need to stem that erosion.
It's slide 17.
I apologize.
I think they were confused.
I'm sorry, slide 17, I apologize. And that shows bus ridership change compared to our peers. Specifically, peers like Pittsburgh and Cleveland are much closer to what our contemporary peers are in the Midwest. And then moving to slide 18, where our ridership decline has not been as great, but still at roughly 6%, it is something that we seek to stem. And so that's one of the reasons that we're trying to look at redesigning the system and making more robust investments in security. Also, just to note what our ridership has been over a period of time. If I move you to slide 19, and I apologize if I'm moving too fast, but I want to be respectful of your time.
Speed is appreciated, sir.
Okay, thank you.
Efficiency.
So, I like efficiency, right? This shows a ridership comparison. So we base our projections on passenger boardings. So roughly we're looking at 35 million passenger boardings projected for 2020. So what we're really seeking is a leveling off of our boardings to have to do with, there are some economic conditions that we cannot control. For instance, we cannot control the inexpensive price of gas, the inexpensive price of vehicles, and some of those. However, we can control system design and security and some of those aspects. So we're seeking to be aggressive in those areas and responsive in the others. So some of those are things that we can control and others that we can't. So essentially, at the next slide, which would be 20, is Metro Reimagined. So this would be our response to that, our response to changing conditions, response to what are the economics of a transit system. And of course, it's state of good repair, safety and security, increased customer amenities, things like Wi-Fi and so on, and increased amenities as far as service design. So for instance, paratransit access and some of those other aspects. So then we would move to the source of capital funds. So the capital budget is slightly different and is over a period of 2 fiscal years. So from FY20 to, 3 fiscal years, I apologize, FY20, 21, and 22. And you see the fundamental breakdown of that. So, and it is very typical. Right now, as far as the Fed is concerned, it's an 80-20 type match. For new starts, it's closer to 50-50. Okay, so if we were to be building a new line, the match contemplated from a federal standpoint is closer to 50-50, just in case that question comes up. So if we talk about federal source, this is a breakdown. Obviously, the federal formula funds. Now, federal formula is based on what our population is and what our ridership is generated. So that's why it is referenced to as formula and is obviously the greatest part. And then all of these other forms we typically put in for grants, CMAQ grants, enhanced mobility, state of good repair. All of those are funds that we regularly pursue, that my staff pursues. And I like to think that we do a good job, but every single day we need to be concentrating on what that future is. So, the local sources of funds. So, for instance, especially on the Missouri side, the fundamental sources of funds are local sales tax. So, in that regard, being fiscally responsible and responsive to all of the citizens of the region. My job is to convince all of the citizens of the region that there is value to transit, whether they ride it or not, that we are fiscally responsible and that we are responsive to what are the questions. So, of course, whenever there are sales tax, and sales tax have passed in this area overwhelmingly in support of transit, but that still means we need to be responsive to that. And so one nice thing about this pie chart is it I think, focuses the need to be responsive. Then if we simply move again on a capital basis to expenses by category. So for instance, obviously vehicles and supporting equipment are rolling stock. That's the largest piece of our capital budget. So that is new buses, new paratransit vehicles, etc. Okay, then of course there's current and future rail projects, and I do have some further detail in the next slide about some of those individual pieces. So let's move to slide 25, and I can just give you a good idea of how do those break down on kind of more project-specific basis. And obviously, there's a list of almost 50 projects, but I tried to give you the highlights here. Of course, there's the rolling stock replacement, which we always need to be looking at, and of course, the light rail vehicle upgrade and replacement, which I mentioned. Our first tranche of light rail vehicles replacement or renovation is about to come. Then, of course, we have a federal grant for the Union Station Tunnel. Union Station Tunnel, as you may know, Metrolink moves under Union Station, and the tunnel is 120 some odd years old, and we need to renovate it, and we're in that process right now. Then we have safety and security initiatives, which would include such things as enhanced camera systems. We're working on doing controlled access points at stations to enhance security. You may have heard of that, and I've been talking in the public about that design change, and we are implementing that right now. So moving along to slide 26. This just kind of talks about our FY 2020 projected statistics. So roughly 35 million rides, 558 square miles. As I mentioned, we have roughly 400 buses in our fleet, light rail, 87 light rail vehicles. And of course, a very important part is our Call a Ride, which of course is our overlaying paratransit, very successful service and very good at serving the public's need. Moving on to slide 27, and really this kind of gets us to the ask. And I did, just for purposes of discussion, include both St. Louis County funding request and the city funding request so that you can see it in context. But if I could move to the city funding request, right now it is currently estimated at $40 million and 99. Now the appropriation request, and the reason why there's a delta in that is we don't know what the actual sales tax collection will be. So we put a 10% estimate on top of that. Now we get what you collect. We don't, the provisions in the legislation is that we only get what indeed is collected under the sales tax. But that's the difference for the delta. Am I stating that correctly, Kathy?
Yes.
Okay. And that comes from, and the reason why there's three pieces of legislation is because there's three different enabling sales tax. So that's why before you today are three separate pieces of legislation, all of which I hope are to your satisfaction. So I apologize for taking up so much time, but I wanted to leave adequate time for questions. I know there's a lot of information. Chairman?
All right, thank you very much, Albie. We will, when David's not present, we'll go around the board for questions. We would start with Alderwoman Howard.
I just have a question. I just need to get to the page where I wrote it down. And I apologize for being late, but I may have missed this. But on page 8, you said that you're 20 million on security.
Right.
You're not using that, or
so that $20 million was put in by my predecessor, and it was a policy initiative that essentially was not funded. Okay. However, since it was passed, I have the obligation to show it in our numbers. I can't wait until it's gone because it's very confusing. So that was not funded by any of our funding organizations. So although it was put in the budget, because it was not funded, we now have to take it out. And in order to show apples to apples, that's why I asked my team to put the line item.
Okay, so it was never funded, never used, and...
Correct. Yes,
Okay.
it was both.
But you are gonna fund security, another effort of security at, what, 19 million? Is that? what I saw?
So I don't remember off the top of my head what the line item is for security. It's a big budget, roughly $300 million. But we did increase security budget roughly $1.7 million annually. That is mostly in labor expense. Okay, so that's through a combination of the professional police departments, of which we have 3, including the city of St. Louis,
Right.
Metro PSOs, and then contract security. And that 1.7 is dedicated to the labor of those increasing actually patrols in all 3 levels.
So you mentioned something about access, safety and security to control access points. How much is that?
So that's on the capital side of the budget.
Okay.
So right now we are in the midst of redesigning 5 of our original stations in this new access control paradigm. To give you a good example of what a station looks like in access control, I would point you to the Cortex station. Of course, it's one of the newest stations, so there's a central point of access. One of the things that our police partners were telling us is that they need better control of the stations. So we need to respond to that. The problem is I have to redesign a system that was designed essentially in the 1990s and 2000s. So we're hitting those stations one at a time, so that we have a central point of access. I point you to the Cortex station simply because that has been done in access control, and indeed everyone who gets on that platform will be checked by security. So every single person who walks on the platform at that point will be checked. So Cortex, just if you want to see how an access control station works, the biggest aspect of that, Alderman, is that the fare media is outside of the controlled area. So that's one of the weaknesses of our system. In a lot of other points of the system, the fare vending machines are inside what would be our secured environment. So it makes it very difficult for our police partners to enforce a line which people walk over. Did I adequately answer, I hope?
I believe so. I guess where you're looking here is the safety and security on the reimagined, I guess it's the page before page 21 would be, is a photo, I guess, of what it would look like.
Actually, that's a great photo. That is correct. So the photo that, and I apologize, I'm fumbling around.
It's not a photo with this good-looking guy in the picture, is it?
No, it isn't. No.
Page
Right after
before
19.
page 21.
Thank you so much. It is right after 19. It would be page 20. So, for instance, if you go to the second page, this is actually a picture, I believe, of the Cortex access point. Okay, so in concept, that's what we're talking about, where and essentially what we do is we man that point. Now, typically with contract security, not with full police, because there's different levels in transit for each point. So the idea in access control is that that point is manned and everyone is checked for their ticket before even going onto the platform. Some of our platforms need to be redesigned in order to accommodate what is this concept, which is also referred to as SEPTED, which is security through environmental control.
Okay. One more question. What is the percent of the population in the metro area that actually uses the services of Metro?
I apologize, Alderman, I don't know. We base on our gross rides, so I don't know if, for instance, I would say if somebody's just ridden it one time or every day, or I'm not sure exactly how to do that metric. However, what I'd like, Alderman, what
measure of how much of the population actually uses. I see you have your ridership.
We do. So we use ridership as a metric, but let me point to, I am really a transportation professional. So when does transit work best? Transit works best when roads work the worst. Okay? So transit works best when there is when Highway 40 is stacked up. That's when transit works. So ideally, these transportation assets should be complementary. We should be designing both our road systems and our transit systems to work in concert. That's the concept. In concert with everything from walking to biking to all of that. If we're going to design our modern city, I would posit to you that this is only one component of a transportation system. And I've worked in that regard, and I hope to work on it in the future.
Any further?
Good, that's all. I
Thank
think
you.
that I agree with you there. I was just
Thank you.
thinking you were gonna say this, everybody should be writing it. So,
I'll let you say that.
Alderman Hubbard, any questions of
A few quick questions. Can you tell us again why the 70 positions were eliminated?
So, for instance, one of the things is fiscal responsibility. So if I point you to, for instance, the chart way in the front where I showed the rise of our expenses over time. It starts in 2017 and you show it in 2020. And for instance, as a CEO, my job is to do an analysis of what our historic budgetary position was. Our historic budgetary position was slanting upwards. That was simply not tenable. Our costs have gone up too much over time. And so, unfortunately, there are some costs that we don't control. As I mentioned, fuel, interest expense, and so on. And because those continued to go up, I had to look at making our company more efficient. And so we eliminated right around 70 positions. Several of those were unfilled and budgeted positions, but nonetheless, there were some real folks that we had to let go, and those were hard decisions. However, the obligation that I have to this committee and, for instance, to my Board of Commissioners is to look at things and look at where our trends are, spot troubling trends, and make the moves. And so this was a move that we made, and I just point you to this simply because it has a good indication of where we were headed and how we had to flatten our expenses in order to fulfill the obligations that the public is demanding.
Okay, and of those 70 positions, do you know roughly how many were actual like bus drivers or operators, or was it some at the top? Or
Most of them were at the top.
Okay.
Chuck, do you mind speaking about this?
Well,
Chuck Stewart, my Executive Vice President.
I know that exact number, but I think very few, most of them were management positions, so they were not bus drivers.
Okay.
We need our bus drivers. We need all the bus drivers we can get. We're looking for bus drivers every day. So it was management positions, so we consolidated stuff up top, which is why I'm here today, because I have to take on more work, be here with you guys. But no, it was not. It did not impact our operating team, our bus operating team.
Okay, thank you. And in regards to the access control station, I know you mentioned Cortex. Will that be unique to just Cortex, or will that be like at the Grand Station and other stations where we know we have a higher influx of crime and incidents?
So we would implement that plan at all the stations eventually.
Okay.
So for instance, there are 5 in redesign right now. Okay, so that would be Forest Park, Hanley, Fairview Heights, Grand, and 8th and Pine. So I apologize for almost forgetting 8th and Pine. However, so we're having designers look at that from, again, a SEPTED concept, from a central point of access. What are the things? Are there blind spots? Where should we be locating the camera systems? All of those aspects of design will be looked at those stations so that we can essentially make our security teams more effective.
Thank you. And lastly, I know over the years since I've been in this capacity, roughly about 8 years, I know there were some issues, especially regarding morale within the department. And I know some of that, it definitely wasn't under your leadership, but what efforts have been made to address that?
Sure. So now I'm moving into the very important morale phase of what we do. So I will tell you that I ride the train every single day. I am on our system all the time. As I mentioned, I consider us to be in a service business. So that means our real value is our people. If you know that 60%, 65% of our overall operating costs are people, that means that those 1,600 bus operators and light rail operators, they are our product. So I need to pivot now from fiscal responsibility into getting those individuals excited about coming into work, excited about interacting with the customers every morning. I'm looking for good morning. How's your ride going? You know, showing up to work on time and ready to go. Most of my people do that every single day. They show up at 4 a.m., they run a hard shift. It's a job that I couldn't do. I couldn't drive a 40-foot bus down Grand, I'll tell you that right now. But I have people who show up and do that every day. And I need to pivot as CEO and figure out how do I empower those people and get them excited to go to work.
Thank you.
No further questions, thank you. Alderwoman Murphy, any questions of Mr. Roach?
Not realized, I apologize for being late also. I was in a meeting in South St. Louis. And my issue, I guess, my main issue and my constituents is always safety. So I think you kind of addressed that. I think it's making the platform safer, I think will go a long way and increase ridership if that perception and then the actual safety is much lower. You know, they use them in every other cities all the time.
That's right.
I'm in Chicago a lot because I have relatives there, and that's all we do.
Yep.
Is use the L or whatever, and everybody does it. My grandkids can do it, you know. And so I'd like us to see us to get there, and I think safety will be a big issue, or is a big issue. So I'm glad that's being addressed. And I have no questions, and I'm sorry.
Thank you very much.
Okay. Great, thank you.
Alderwoman Spencer, any questions?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Roach, for being here today and the service that the Metro Bi-State provides our city and our region. We have 3 bills before us. The way I understand them, the 43, 44, and 45. 43 is pertaining to the 1994 sales tax. Maybe you could just describe what we're looking at. I mean, from what I understand, the 43 is just simply appropriating $11 million out of the quarter-cent sales tax from the 1994 passed ordinance.
Yes, ma'am, that's right.
44 is doing the same with the 1997 quarter-cent sales tax.
That is right.
Another 11 million. And then what is 45 doing?
So unfortunately, it is a little bit more complicated because of how the legislation went. And Kathy, can I ask you to explain that a little further?
The 1973 sales tax?
Well, just the 3 different bills. I mean, we have 3 different bills, so I'm just trying to understand exactly what we're trying to do here. Appropriating the 1994 sales tax with 43, appropriating the 1997 sales tax with Board Bill number 44, and with Board Bill 45, I'm just not clear what this one does.
The 45.
And they're almost in the opposite order. Actually, 45 references the 1973 sales tax, I believe, or it's...
We need to step to the table for a long discussion. It sounds like a longer answer.
I'm sorry.
No, she can sit next to you.
That'd be great.
Come, get in the hot seat. It sounds like a longer answer than...
Well, I just don't want to misstate it. So
okay,
thank you
very much, Kim.
Thank you.
Please continue.
Yes, there have been over the course since 1973 three different sets of sales taxes that have been passed to support public transportation. The first one was the 1973 tax. It was a half-cent sales tax. It was, and of course, it was passed in the 70s. And it was, since it's a half-cent, it was it's generating approximately twice what the other 2 taxes are because they're both quarter cents. Okay, so that tax is subject to TIF, all right? So that's why they don't look like perfectly double, you know, the other 2 taxes. That's the only tax subject to TIF. So I don't have the bill in front of me, so it was probably approximately 22 million. Does that sound right?
21.9.
21.9. So that represents the half-cent sales tax that was passed in the 70s. Which is subject to TIF. So we get the amount less TIF. The other 2 taxes are quarter cent, 94 and 1997. So that's why they're generating approximately half what the 1973 tax is.
So essentially we're just appropriating the sales tax that passed by the voters. when you speak of an ask, there's no additional funds coming from the city general fund or any other revenue streams. You're simply just appropriating the sales tax that passed by voters.
That's absolutely accurate, and I apologize if I didn't make that clear.
I just want to make sure that we're clear of what the ask is. It's just simply appropriating what the voters decided to appropriate.
Absolutely, that is correct.
Okay. The ridership numbers, do we have we're looking at 2017 versus 2016. Do we happen to have what that looks like 2018 versus 17? I know it's not in this presentation, but is that something you can follow up with? Just want to see how that's trending moving forward.
Sure.
For a year, since we're a year behind. Yeah. We did a lot of comparisons here with our.
It's this one. So I would point you actually to page 19, Alderman.
Okay.
Okay.
We did go over it.
So for instance, there are
right there.
Those are the projections. However, this is not showing what the peers are doing during that period of time. I can't. Unfortunately, it's close. But to get to FY19 and to our projections, we're showing for budgetary purposes, of course, a continuing erosion. I'd prefer that, for instance, in FY 2020, we don't have 4.2. I'd like to be at 0. Okay, but in order to be fiscally responsible, we're trying to show where the trend is heading. Okay, so the effort there is not to be overly optimistic. I apologize if I'm not answering your question.
That's okay. I'm looking at 17 and 18. If there was just a way to, I agree, just look at the trends.
Yes.
I'm just curious to see where we're stacking up moving forward. Just having.
So some regions have recovered a little quicker than us. So for instance, if and this is somewhat anecdotal off the top of my head, but for instance, Denver is recovering a little, but their economy, quite frankly, is a little more robust right now in recovery. Some of the areas in the southeast, for instance, Charlotte, is also seeing a little bit quicker recovery. Now, economically, that holds true for a Midwestern city. Quite frankly, our highs are not so high, but our lows are not so low. So the movement is not as rapid, both in a depression cycle and a recovery cycle. And that is generally true. And so we tried to throw a different smattering of peer agencies in there. I'd like to use Pittsburgh, but sometimes Pittsburgh doesn't quite fit. Indianapolis sometimes, but there's always some of those individual differences.
I'm more looking at just St. Louis and trying to understand how the safety and security concerns have played into ridership and other things. If it was possible just to look at the ridership, we've got 16 versus 17. If we could just throw 18 in there just for St. Louis purposes, just to see where we are moving.
It's on here, on page 19.
It is on page 19.
That's just overall.
It's on page 19.
The ridership trends.
That's the trends, but that's not. So the 2018 numbers are.
Right, 37.
They're actual numbers. Okay.
Yes, those are actual. That's right.
Okay.
And then those are budgetary for
19.
19.
I understand.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
That's quite all right.
So we're just thinking.
So I mean, the bus ridership is down further than the light rail rate.
That is
what I'm looking at in the previous slides.
That's right.
And this is just an overall trend. So just kind of understanding how that fits in.
Yes, so they're definitely combined, and
sure.
Nationally, just to add a comment, bus ridership has been eroding more than light rail. So that has been happening across the country.
Doing the comparison is really helpful, especially when it comes to the good figures we have as far as money per mile, et cetera. I know a lot of these other systems are funded partially, at least, by the state, their states. It would be helpful to have some of that information just to keep that in mind as we move forward, that there are other funding sources available to other public transit systems across the country. We fail to have that option here in St. Louis because of our state legislature, but we should be reminded of that fact, I believe. The security that you mentioned and that we've discussed briefly, the 1.7 million in additional security measures, what is that as an overall percentage of the security budget as far as an increase goes?
The security budget is close to $18 million annually.
Okay.
Now, that's just right off the top of my head, so I apologize if
That's
I'm
okay.
slightly off, but right around as far as enormity is concerned, it's roughly a 10% increase in
Great.
security. And that will be largely centered around labor.
Okay.
Chuck, do you concur with that?
I agree.
And what does that look like? So additional security on, you mentioned some, checking people.
That's right. So
It'll be primarily.
So we are in the midst of putting together essentially a complete resurgence in our security program, informed by the study that we did in conjunction with East-West Gateway. And of course, I made some decisions to change our leadership in security. So all 3 of those executive positions in security are on the street right now, and we are soliciting for that. The idea is to completely change the security paradigm. We need to do a better job of strengthening the relationships between our professional police partners. I think there's been a lot of evidence that that's been happening. You may have seen in the news some of the indictments. Kim Gardner's office actually assisted us in indictments with a very bad crime element that was on our system. That was done through the fundamental work of the city, Metro PSOs. Most of those indictments come down from 90% of the work, which is looking at video, watching the platforms, doing that fundamental work, and then we give it to our partners in the circuit attorney's office, and we hopefully move forward and get those people off of our system. If I would pivot to the county, as a matter of fact, since I have been there, there's been 6 larger crimes committed on the county part of the system. Of those, they've caught the perpetrator 4 times. So I think those are good pieces of practical evidence that we've been making traction. The public has asked us to do a better job of strengthening our relationships with these professional police partners, and I've been working on that every single day.
I appreciate that. I think that's been the biggest issue that as aldermen we deal with, complaints about security and just that feeling of uneasiness on our public transit system. And so grateful to hear that that relationship between the different police agencies is improving and that's moving in the right direction. So that's all really the questions I have. Other than I would like to mention that I know it's a granular issue, but cleanup of the stations, garbage removal and that sort of thing is something that I think needs some additional resources and some attention to. We have a lot of debris and people just throwing trash around the
Are
stations.
you talking about just at the bus stations? Or even just at the metro stations, or are you talking about?
Well, in general, we have a problem, but at bus stops and stuff like that. I mean, it continues to be an issue. So I appreciate attention to that.
Thank you, Alderwoman. Alderwoman Muhammad is not present. Alderman Oldenburg, you're next on the question.
Just one question. Thanks again for coming in. The capital budget. I'm on slide 21. What's the source of that? The local funding for existing system and the capital improvements.
So we peel off of the budget of this existing appropriation. So there's no addition. It's peeled off, and so that accounts for that over a period of time. So please remember, this capital budget is over a period of several fiscal years. Okay. So we take the appropriation budgetarily through each, and so there's no additional funding asked from local as far as capital is concerned. Unless, of course, in the exception in Illinois, there is state funding, and sometimes our partners at the transit district do fund specific capital requests.
Gotcha. Okay.
No further questions?
No further questions.
Thank you. Alderman Boyd is not here. Alderman Clark Hubbard? You were here, but he left. You can go back. I
don't have any questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. And Alderman Vaccaro?
I do, actually, a few.
Imagine.
Not many. I'll keep it very short. What percentage of the tax does the county give to Metro, bi-state, whatever? I know they don't give it all, because we've argued this every year.
So you would have to ask the county that question. My job is to present my budget to the county and ask them to fulfill that budget.
But they don't give 100%.
Yes, but I don't know what that is, to be perfectly honest. My job is to go in and ask for the appropriation. I apologize, go ahead.
Well, you don't know it, so there's
I just don't know.
But I do know they don't give all of it. My other problem is the cleanup of the stations. I know you guys pay the city a certain amount back to clean up the bus stops, and I don't know that that's an appropriate amount. I think it's what, 300 and something thousand, or what do you? I know the city cleans the bus stops up.
Okay. So I
What
apologize.
about these guys could pay for that?
So Alderman, I don't know every line item in our budget. There's no question, and I don't know the answer to that. But I'm happy to get that information for you. Obviously, we are part of the community. We have problems on our transit system, where, for instance, our patrons are responsible for things that happen good and bad, just like in any neighborhood. So those are normal things that we have to deal with. The best way that we deal with that is through the strength of our partnerships, and one of the issues that we've been trying to attack is certainly through security. The other part is, if we're going to regain ridership, I encourage you to go onto our system. Our system in the cleanliness of our vehicles and cleanliness of our light rail vehicles, I would say, compare with anyone nationally. We can do a better job on the bus stops, that's true. But I would encourage you to compare us to other systems.
That didn't really answer any of the questions.
I believe the one question is, the dollar amount, he will get that answer and have it distributed to all the members of the committee.
Okay. Are we going to hold these or vote on these?
Well, these are basically the will of the people. These are our pass rate. These are taxes. We're merely appropriating.
Well, I know, but in the county it's the same taxes, and they don't give 100% of this to the. And I mean, it's just an argument that's come up every year that I've sat on this for the last 10 years.
We're dealing with legislation that is there for a purpose, and the purpose of the fund. We have a gentleman who actually has cut $20 million from the budget to make the money go a little further this year, I believe, and better distribution.
I wasn't here, and so, but them are questions I know that come up on it.
Yeah, but it's, so I feel that if someone if there's no further questions, we can go by these bills.
I just have a quick question, and I
apologize. Muhammad had a question, but he's in legislation.
Yeah, we can't wait for that. We have another.
I just have a quick question. I apologize if I missed this. Who all in this room is here with you, with bi-state, representing bi-state? If you don't mind making an introduction.
You were here when they did that.
I didn't. That's why I said I wasn't here. Do you mind? I don't know.
No, I don't mind. This is Kathy Cleavorn, who was the CFO of the organization, but she's done such a good job, I'm not letting her leave. And this is Larry Rubarski, who is also on the budgetary side of my organization. And this is Chuck Stewart, who is an executive vice president with me and a very important policy advisor. And of course, you may know Lou Hamilton, who's a lobbyist with the city.
Is Lou a lobbyist with the city or with bi-state?
I'm sorry, with bi-state. I'm for the city. Employed by us under contract for the city. That's right.
Do you have that contract?
I do not.
Okay.
But it is.
Who are we supposed to be communicating with?
So me.
With you directly? Is that an okay direct communication?
It's perfectly fine for you to call me anytime, Alderman. I have tried to move in taking over the organization to try to personalize all of my relationships and then pivot you to staff if that's what I need to do to get accuracy. I apologize, Mr. Vaccaro, that, for instance, I couldn't answer your question, but as an example, I'm not going to know every detail.
Mr. Roach has just recently taken this position over.
I'm aware.
Okay.
Yeah.
So
appreciate the direct.
So I'm happy for you to call me anytime. I try to make myself available, and I'd like to lead this organization so it's responsive to the policymakers.
I appreciate it. Thank you, Mr. Roach.
All right. If there's no further questions or comments, go ahead.
In the past, we've had like a liaison. I mean, I wouldn't call you about like bus routes or like benches at bus stops. So who is that person now? It's been some time since I've spoken with that person.
So correct. So I do have an executive director of the transit division. That is Jessica Mefford Miller. So she is also actually an executive vice president. I have 4 executive vice presidents, one of which is Chuck. And then I have Jessica Mefford Miller, Mary Lammy, and why am I?
Could you forward us their contact?
We have the contact information forwarded to the committee.
I'm happy to follow up with that in appropriate phones so that we can reference to each specialty. So I'm happy to do so.
Thank you.
Yeah, we had a contact point at one time, just so you know.
All right.
Any further questions or comments while Mr. Roach is here before we proceed? No. All right, hearing none. We will do these three. These again are 3 companion bills. The first one, bill number 43, is in regard to the quarter-cent sales tax appropriated in 1994 by the voters. I will entertain a motion.
I move that we pass board bill number 43 with the due pass recommendation.
Second.
Okay. And we will take a roll call. Sharita, thank you, dear.
Alderman Davis, Alderman Vaccaro,
Aye.
Alderwoman Howard,
Aye.
Alderwoman Hubbard,
Aye.
Alderwoman Murphy,
Aye.
Alderwoman Spencer,
Aye.
Alderman Muhammad, Alderman Oldenburg,
Aye.
Alderwoman Boyd, Alderwoman Clark Hubbard,
Aye.
Chairman Ballmer.
Aye.
8 aye votes.
Okay. Thank you for your vote. We take care of bill number 43 and pass out the due. And we will go to board bill number.
Motion to pass bill 44.
Second.
Due pass recommendation.
Previous roll.
Hearing no objection, previous roll. We'll consider bill number 44 passed out. I'll entertain a motion on board bill number 45.
I move that we pass board bill 45 with the due pass recommendation.
Second. Previous roll.
Hearing no objection, previous roll, we consider board bill number 45 passed out. Thank you, members. Thank you, Mr. Roach. Thank you, the staff. We appreciate your time. Let's apologize to the sheriff on the way out. Okay, you guys need to stretch your legs or do anything for 2 minutes. We're having the sheriff's office.
2 minutes.
There's snacks.
Oh, look, I forgot.
Close the door. We'll call the Ways and Means hearing back to order. And we're taking back up board bill number 1 with a interview with the Sheriff's Department discussing his needs and wants for our budget for board bill number 1. And if everybody's comfortable with sitting down, we will start. Go ahead, Sheriff.
Well, good evening, everybody. Good to see you. Good afternoon, rather. I hope you have the handout. Greg was passing out to everybody, and so as we go along, I may skip some points because you can then read unless you have some pointed questions. But I'd like to start off by just reading what we've kind of printed up so I don't get all jumbled up. So here we go. I stand before you today with grave concerns. I have distributed a letter to this committee containing the testimony in writing. It is my duty as sheriff of the city of St. Louis to provide the best sheriff's office to the citizens of St. Louis. One of the many missions of the St. Louis Sheriff Office is to provide the citizens, employees, visitors, and prisoners to our court building a safe, secure environment to conduct their daily business. Thankfully, over the past 2 years, because of the hard work of St. Louis Sheriff deputies, we have operated with barely no incidents, no major incidents is what I want to say. But it is with grave concern that I report to this committee at these staffing, training, and readiness levels that we are gambling with safety of the courts, safety of the citizens of St. Louis, the employees, and anybody that uses the building. We are gambling with the safety and welfare of the prisoners in my custody and the safety of my own deputies. I cannot guarantee that I can fulfill this mission because of good faith entreaties to the Board of Estimate and Apportionment, the Budget Director, and the judges of the 22nd Judicial Circuit have been summarily ignored. I guess in essence what I'm trying to say there is that I've had contact with all of those different entities, and I'm not don't feel like I'm getting a fair shake from those entities, and so now here we are today. The sheriff office is currently staffed at the lowest level in history. I do not have the staff to man all necessary posts. Security posts are left unmanned. Prisoners and hospitals are being guarded by only one deputy against the office requirements of having 2 people. That's the protocol, having 2 people. Additionally, my deputies are required to continually work beyond the 40 hours a week without overtime pay. Of course, you all know we don't get paid overtime. The current prohibition on overtime requires that deputies are compensated with compensatory time, CT time, as you may hear later on. The now chronic understaffing and inability to properly compensate my employees has created a buildup of over 17,500 unfunded work hours, and this number is growing by approximately 1,500 more hours every year. It's also creating, I don't have in there, it's creating a bit of a problem with the morale of my staff. Working these guys overtime like we have, not getting compensated with overtime, and it hurts there because a lot of times when I make them work over, they actually miss an opportunity to work their secondary job where they would be getting paid overtime, and in a lot of instances making more money than what they make working for the sheriff's department. Furthermore, I have requested a training budget of $150,000 to bring sheriff deputies up to the minimum training standards for law enforcement. We are classified as a law enforcement agency now. This budget appropriates $10,000. The budget that we just turned in or just received back only appropriated $10,000 for the training. This amount does not cover the cost to purchase ammunition, tasers, OC, and that's our spray, replacements required for annual training. We don't, the $10,000 won't even pay for our annual training cost. These are the basic requirements to run this office. I have exhausted all discretionary funds covering these costs over the past 2 years. I have a statutory mandate to run this office, and the city is required to fund this office operations. I believe that's by statute. For your reference, this office does much more than provide courthouse security. I have found that many aldermen do not know or understand the full responsibility and the total mission of the St. Louis Sheriff Department. So what I have here next, and I don't know if you want me to read it all, I know we have some time constraints, but there are several bullet points that follow, and I'd like for you all to take a look at that, and if you have questions, they're very important to be brought out, and it'll help you understand more about how and what we do at the Sheriff Department and how critical it is for us to get the necessary staffing and funding that we need. I just want to point out this one we were just talking about outside. My crisis intervention team in 2018, we executed 167, and that's on page 3 at the top. We executed 167 ex partes. That's where we go to pick up the mental health patients. That's about 3 a week, and I'm telling you folks, that particular operation, the St. Louis Police Department doesn't like and doesn't want to be a part of, because that's where we go to pick up people who have mental issues, and it's dangerous. It's dangerous. So I pray every time my staff go out 2, 3, 4 times a week. We've gone into homes to get these people. They're mental, they have guns, they have weapons, they fight, they run, and so it's dangerous. I mean, it's dangerous. That's the kind of stuff that keeps me up at night. Responsibility for executing evictions. We did 1,851 in 2018. 95 cars, furniture, and all that kind of stuff. 1,851 evictions. That too is dangerous. And we've had fights. People have accosted our deputies. And so we need to have the manpower, so when we go out on those kind of missions, we have the number of people that's needed to take care of that without anybody getting hurt. So you see other things down there. I don't know if you want me to read every bullet point. I think you can read that for yourself. Any of my, Steve, you see anything that you think we should set before this committee that they really need to hear?
All right.
Do we have any questions?
Well, I will take care of that, Sheriff. If there's no further presentation from your staff, we will start with Alderman Vaccaro. Any questions of Sheriff or her staff?
Yes. First off, with all due respect, I appreciate the deputies. I know they work hard. But finding, right now, the fire department, for instance, they cut $300,000 for Narcan, which is a very safety item when they go out on the scene. They cut the money for the replacement of the oxygen tanks, which the city's already been sued over. We don't make up the budget. It comes to us. In order for us to find, and I know we talk about this every year, in order for us to find more funding, and if I had all the money in the world, I would give the sheriffs more money, raises, and everything else. The issue is we have to cut from somewhere in order to give money to the sheriff's department. Right now, we're being tasked, especially on the public safety side, which is about 70% of our budget overall, public safety. We're being tasked to find $300,000 for oxygen so the firefighters can go into things. We're having to find money to fund Narcan and different drugs, not only just Narcan, but IVs and different things. And they were pretty clear that without that, people are going to die. And I appreciate the work you do. I appreciate the work of the sheriff's department, but I do want you to understand it's not a personal thing. But in order to find $150,000 in this budget, we have to cut somewhere, and it's pretty rare that we could. I mean, I'd be happy to sit down with you. If you could point out where I'd find $150,000 plus the $300 plus the money that all the different departments want. It's a tough sell. So with all respect, I just wanted you to understand why or how we operate and why it isn't as easy just to come in and say, when it went to Paul Payne, he could have made those decisions. But when that budget comes to us, it comes to us as it is. In other words, we can't add to a budget without subtracting from another one. And my biggest, hardest thing right now is, where we're going to find the money for the Narcan and the oxygen tanks. I have all respect in the world for the sheriff's department. I ran for that. And I know that those guys deserve more than they get. But I do want you to understand that this has to do with, we would have to cut another department. I mean, do I think that things are how they should be? Probably not. Do I think there's too many people that are overpaid? Probably. But just so you understand that the budget comes to us, and it's not that we don't want to find it, because if we had it, I'd do it. But
Anything further?
No, I just want to understand
No, I
the
think you made your
process.
point, yes.
Okay.
Okay. Yeah,
That's really all I had.
All right, thank you very much.
Chance to respond to that?
You respond, certainly, sir.
Okay, and folks, everybody in this room know Vernon Betts. I'm a citizen of this city, 66 years. I keep my finger on the pulse of what goes on. City Hall, you see my folks over here on Fridays, and you see me a lot of times on Fridays, so I know what's going on with the budget and all that kind of stuff. Some of you in this room elected me to be your sheriff, and my responsibility is to the 22nd Judicial District, and I have to do everything that's within my power to make that place safe. I campaigned on the promise that we would run a more efficient, more effective, and a safer place. Now, I know other people need to be fed, other babies need to be fed, all that, but I need to feed my babies, and that's all I'm saying, Joe. We are that Narcan, we have drug court in our building. We're the ones that do the drug court. And so we've been trained on the Narcan. We know how important it is to have Narcan. Matter of fact, we have had those instances where so we know how important that is, but still, we're not operating under the safest conditions by not staffing the St. Louis Sheriff Department at the level that it should be. And what we're doing here, folks, is just, we're gonna end up with something like what we had out there in St. Louis County. And when we have an incident where one of those deputies get hurt, killed, something happens to them, then I want you all to stand with me when I stand before the public and before those family members and people saying, oh, we just didn't have enough people to get the work done, so we had to work one deputy by himself, and there we go. So that's all I'm saying, Joe.
And just one fast follow-up. Sheriff, just so you understand, I'm not looking to cut your budget. I'm just saying how hard it is for us to add to that budget.
Why didn't you all give me something out of Proposition P? We passed Proposition
Well, Proposition P is nothing we can do about it at this time.
No, I'm just saying.
Well, that's the point.
And everything like that should be brought up with the mayor's office, the budget director.
Yes, sir.
I'm just explaining, we're not here to cut your budget.
I think we're understanding you're not going to cut the budget, Joe.
Thank you.
Okay.
All right, thank you. Alderman Howard.
Sheriff Betts, thank you for coming today.
Yes, ma'am.
And
Thank
letting
you,
us
Carol.
know. I understand, we're all under constraints.
Yes.
You're a county office, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, and you serve the Missouri 22nd Judicial
Yes,
Court.
ma'am.
Are there any funds available through those resources?
Possible. We think that there are. We've had some conversation with folks in Jeff City, and we think that there could be. We just haven't pursued that direction yet, but that's possible.
I'm not saying I want to give you less, but I think that we need to be resourceful.
Yes, ma'am.
And seek out funding sources where we can.
And actually, Carol, we have talked to our senator, and our senator just, I think, initiated a bill. I think we kind of got
Senator initiated?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay,
and
great.
we were a little late in getting in on her bill because we were in the budgetary process. We thought asking for the $150,000, we'd have a good chance of getting some of that. We only got 10,000. So now we may have to wait and get with Senator Jamila Nasheed at a later date, but I think her budget has already been passed up in Jeff City. But
they
because
gotta
of
come
that,
back again.
right? And because we know that they got to come in, that we might be able to dip in on that.
Ask for 200.
Yes, ma'am. Yeah.
All right,
no, but I mean, I understand your situation, but I think, you serve the Missouri court system and you have, and I think maybe that might be another place. And
yes, ma'am.
I'm sorry, we would have to rob Peter to pay Paul, and there's always a price to pay there.
Yeah.
So, but I understand. I thoroughly understand.
Alderman Howard, I just want you to understand.
Yes.
I'm sorry.
But before we speak, you'll have to introduce yourself. We are on camera.
Yep.
And so if there's going to be a conversation had, you'll have to step forward so we know who you're speaking. If there's a comment you'd like him to make, Sheriff Betsy, take a seat and speak.
Is it okay?
Sure.
Yeah, he's asked to
Absolutely.
step up and announce who he is. So
Sergeant Timothy Hale.
Okay.
Alderman Howard, I just wanted to direct towards you that we have proposed this year in advance of the court and bank trying to impose higher court fees for sheriff fees and all that kind of stuff. Last year we made that proposal later than when the court and bank had met and already set the fees for this year. Right. With that increase, it would probably bring us past that $150,000. And this increase would not bring us past any of our surrounding counties, St. Charles, Jefferson, St. Louis County.
So you wouldn't even be on a par with them?
We would be at par with these counties on all the fees if the court increases these fees at that current rate.
Now, those are
court costs.
That are court costs that are assessed.
Sheriff fees, different fees that are charged.
And we've got a no from the judges, Alderman.
Okay. Yeah. All right.
Anyone else?
Well, I'll take care of that.
Okay. Okay.
All right, Alderman Howard. No further questions from you?
Okay, no further questions.
Alderman Hubbard, any questions of the panel?
Two brief questions. The fees that you were just talking about, so ultimately, who would be paying those fees? Are those fees that are passed on to people that are within the courts, like other fees, and then they'll revert back, or?
Yeah,
Yes,
let
ma'am.
me handle, I'll handle that. Hi, I'm Steve Roberts, I'm Chief of Staff. I guess my rank is Colonel, that's what I'm supposed to be. That's why I get to wear a badge now, Alderman Hubbard. With the court system in the state of Missouri, what happens is all of the circuits will establish their own court fees. Now, it's the Sheriff's Department, we can request that they increase their fees. So these are fees that are for filing. If it's a divorce filing, if it's an eviction. And so we did an analysis when we got in the office that said, how do our fees compare to other counties throughout the state of Missouri, particularly the surrounding counties? We're about 50% of what the fees that if you were to go in Franklin County and file a eviction, we're half of that, or St. Charles County. So what we're trying to do, Ways and Means last year suggested that we look for ways to find more income for the city, which would hopefully benefit us. So we went to the courts last year and made the request that they up their fees. After about 4 months, the response, Alderman Howard, was no response at all. Then at the end of the year, end of 18, they sent us a note without any discussion saying, these are what the fees will be for 2019. So we have made that request again to see if they're willing to do it. Maybe this committee can push them along to do it. Remember, you know, they're just kind of one of our constituents. You know, we collect the revenue as a constituent of ours because we do all of their filings for posting of notices. We do the ex-party stuff. I mean, we have 5 or 6 different divisions. We work with corrections, Department of Corrections. We do all the prisoner transport. They legally cannot transport prisoners. We work with the U.S. Marshals. So we have about 5 different constituencies. And to answer one other question that the sheriff missed, we have requested of Department of Justice to allow us to increase the fees for transportation. They're willing to do that. Our problem is this. We cannot handle the people right now who they ask us to transfer to U.S. Marshals. We physically do not have enough people to do it. So when the Department of Public Safety and Corrections and this department decided that they wanted to increase the number of prisoners, I think it's going to increase $2.5 billion this year. We're the only people, our department is the only department who can actually transfer them, and we don't have the people and the personnel to do it, which is why we're asking for these increases. If we don't do it, then we'll stop doing it, basically.
And so the increase from last year compared to this year was like $200 and some thousand. Is that for additional staff or increased wages?
It's all for additional. It's 5 additional people. Let me go back, if I can. When this sheriff was sworn in January 1st, 2017, they immediately cut 5 personnel. There were 170 people on the
165.
165. And so they've cut 5 people every year for the last 2 years. So what we're trying to do is get back to where we were when we first started. But the sheriff's analysis of it, it says that we're actually 15 people short, even with this increase, to handle the increase of the U.S. Marshal prisoners, to increase the number of people who were picking up with the mental illnesses and drug issues. Because what we're doing right now, I think the sheriff said it, we're pulling people literally out of the courtrooms and sending them out to do all these other things.
Yeah.
So the judges are not happy with that either.
Tamika, are you aware of the deal that was made between the Department of Public Safety and the feds, that we've increased the number of federal prisoners that we house and transport, and we do the transporting, but the deal was made between Jimmy Edwards and somebody over here, this is Paul Payne. The city gets 30%, the jails get, the city gets 30%, the jail gets 70%, and the sheriff gets nothing, and I'm doing half of the work. I don't know how that works out like that. But there again, Carol, talking about us coming up with bringing in added revenue, Joe, we think we're contributing to the additional revenue by going along with this deal of transporting more, and it's putting a heck of a lot of pressure on me, because by law we have to have 2 deputies sitting on every prisoner by law, by federal law. So when those guys, 2 or 3 at a time, go out to the hospital, if it's 3, that's 6 of my deputies for however long they're out there. So it's killing me. But we think that that's additional revenue. We get none of that to help us out with our budgetary needs.
I understand your concerns about that, but we definitely are in a public safety crisis in our city, and I feel that should be spread throughout many different departments. So I think that conversation doesn't need to stop here. I mean, it needs to be had with Room 200. It needs to be had with the feds and everyone else, because if you all are doing the additional, and the state as well, if you all are doing the additional work, then some support should be added. But I think the problem that we've been facing, and this is my first time on Ways and Means, it just seems like, everybody want everything, but it's just only so much to go around. And so that's where it's incumbent on us to try to prioritize what's really important. And I'm not sure what can be done regarding their budget, but I do know that it's some decisions that should be made in how we handle things and spend our money.
Alderwoman Hubbard, and you're right. And again, I was here last year with some of the same people, and they made suggestions, and we tried to adhere. The thing about us needing the $150,000 for training and all that, it's once we get through that post-training, that's basically what that's for, then we can apply for grants. Right now, we can't apply for those government grants and stuff because we're not post-certified. But if we could get post-certified, then we can apply for grants. And I may come back to you next year and say, hey, the $10,000 is all I need. But because we can't get post-certified, then we're missing out on opportunities to raise our own money.
Okay. Any further questions?
No further.
All right, thank you. All right, Alderwoman Murphy.
As most mine were asked and answered too. I remember you bringing that up about the training last year, that then the sheriffs would be able to do more and whatnot. And so then, I have this correct, so, your department is responsible for recovering $3.5 million in delinquent property tax.
Yes, ma'am.
And you get none of that, obviously. Or do you get a percentage of what you recover?
Yes, we do. We do get a small percentage of 5%. But yeah, my first year here, 2017, we sold $3.5 million in delinquent properties, and then last year it was $2.27 million, and then we've just started for this year, and we've had our first sale, and we just this week, and we sold $300,000 and some worth. So we are contributing, I think, in some ways to the welfare of the city.
It seems to me the arguments have to come, like Alderwoman Hubbard said, before it gets to us.
Yes.
There needs to be something worked out.
Right.
We just cut up the pieces of the pie. They come to us, and we can maybe make one a little bigger, one a little smaller.
And I know exactly where you all stand and your responsibility. And like I said, we've gone to all those, Tamika, I've gone to all those other entities, and I'm just not getting the help. I'm not, so who else do I turn to? So now here I am crying to you all again. We did it last year, so I'm right back again. But who do I turn to? I'm sorry.
Any further questions, Alderman?
No, thank you.
Thank you very much. Alderwoman Spencer.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Sheriff, for being here today.
Yes, ma'am.
We're grateful for the service you provide, especially keeping folks safe. It's a very important role. So if I understand correctly, the $100,000 training is your number one ask.
150.
Excuse me, $150,000. It would be helpful, I think, for us. You mentioned some of these grants that we could be eligible for. If you could provide a summary of what might be available to the city of St. Louis and what this $150,000 or $140,000 over the budgeted amount would sort of bias as far as federal grant availability. I echo some of the earlier comments about looking for our state funding.
Yes,
and I think you have a room full of folks that would be willing to help you or support that effort, certainly in any way, shape, or form. And if am I understanding correctly, the mayor's office was not cooperative in looking to increase some of the fees that we charge to get us in line with the regional average?
Well, what we say, not so much the mayor as it is for the courts, the judges,
Okay,
the judges.
I'm sorry, so I did misunderstand it. So it's the courts that were uncooperative.
Yes.
How can we compel the courts to become cooperative with us, to become competitive in what we can generate as far as compensating your office for the work you do?
I guess if we put that increased fees in our budget, and then we send that budget over here to Paul Payne, I would hope that you guys, somebody over here could put pressure on Mr. Payne or whoever he answers to say, hey, we need to go along with, and that's what it seems to be. I don't know if Alderwoman, I don't know if it's a political thing or what, but
what we're charging for those services is not a decision made by Mr. Payne, I don't believe.
No.
It's by the courts.
It's by the courts.
Right.
So is that something, Mr. Chairman, that we could compel the courts to address by way of a resolution or other measures? I mean, I would be interested in seeing, what I don't see in here is the income that the sheriff's office is able to generate through tax sale liens. And it is in here? No. Excuse me, you're right, okay. But
I think you are right about the fees, though. Yeah, you're on the right track with the fees. Those we could increase our fees, not to exceed their surrounding, to just put us on par.
Right. Well, Mr. Chair, could you provide us with what you would like those fees to change to, and what additional income that would generate for your office?
Yes.
We'll put that together.
Well, your request, you put that into the form and give it to all the members of the committee?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir, we can do that.
Yeah, that would,
and
because we want you to be able to perform at the level that you need to.
And you asked about the grants and stuff, and we'll give you a list. We started working on that. We'll give you a list of those grants that we possibly could qualify for, and how that would then help our budget. And so we'll give that to you, and we'll get that information to you.
Anything further, Alderman?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Sheriff.
All right. We have Alderman Muhammad. Any questions or comments of the Sheriff's Department?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I apologize for being late. As you know, we had a legislative committee hearing as well. Trying to fight against war reduction.
Yes, sir.
I look forward to your support, Sheriff.
Yes, sir.
How much more money do you need?
I need $150,000.
Write him a check.
Tom, write him a check. 850,000.
Yeah.
150,000.
No, that's for training only.
Training.
But for the additional 5 people.
For the other 5 people, it's going to probably be an additional about $700,000.
5 people?
If you give me, no, that's not for the 5. That's for the.
That's to get you 185.
That's for the additional 15 more people. We're budgeted for 160. We need 185 deputies to run the place efficiently.
Right.
So that's another 25, and that additional 25 deputies is going to cost us about $700,000 more.
One more question.
Yes, sir.
So I know that last session we passed a board bill authorizing the city to do federal transport of prisoners.
Yes, sir.
That was orchestrated through the Department of Public Safety.
Yes,
of course, outside of your particular department. But I know that there was some intercooperation between you and the director, from what I understand.
Yes.
How much is the city bringing in for the federal transport of prisoners, and where is that money going specifically?
Board, I think about a month or so ago, it came out in the newspapers that we had already been paid from the feds $1.7 million for housing and transporting federal prisoners. It's been guesstimated that by the end of this fiscal period, St. Louis will have taken in about $2.5 million from housing and transporting these federal prisoners, John, and the St. Louis Sheriff Department was not involved in however they cut that up. My understanding is the city got 30%, the jails got 70%, and the sheriff was doing half of the work, got nothing.
So have you been orchestrating the federal transports as of thus far? Or?
Every day, and it's killing me.
And
every day.
And you have not gotten reimbursed at all?
No, sir, I have not.
No, we get reimbursed for it. Well, let me explain how
You're not getting a full.
No. We basically, we discovered after the sheriff took office about a year or so ago that the sheriff's department gets reimbursed $23 per hour per person to transport prisoners. That contract was signed by the sheriff in 1994 and the director of public safety at that point. So in the last 20 some odd years, there's been no increases because the contract is between sheriff and the U.S. Marshals with public safety doing their own thing. Now they have gotten an increase. Department of Public Safety Corrections has gotten an increase. We have not gotten one. So all we can do is bill Alderman the amount of the hourly wages and stuff. Now our view is simply, this is what the sheriff said a little bit before you came in. We cannot afford to do that anymore. We just don't have the personnel to do it. The average number of prisoners has gone up from how many per year?
In 1 month, we did 300 and some odd prisoner transports to the U.S. Marshal Service, and that was the entire preceding year's total amount.
Yeah.
In 1 month, we did that.
So even though the city is benefiting an additional $2.5 million total in housing these prisoners, the Sheriff's Department really gets no part of that. So we then have to transport these folks. Now, if we don't, if we say we're done, we're not going to do it anymore, they have a problem because the Department of Corrections cannot transport by state statute. Can only the sheriff of the city of St. Louis. Now, they can go outside and hire another sheriff's department to do it outside the city of St. Louis, but we're the only entity within the city. The police department can't even do it. So
potentially, if that money was coming back from the transportation, then would that give you the $150,000 you need for the training?
Sure, above and beyond.
Above and beyond, as well as the personnel that to do the transport.
So a conversation needs to take place between you and I'm assuming maybe the Director of Public Safety?
Well, actually, it probably needs to come to a board bill from you all because you've already passed the bill giving the department 70%, the city 30%. If you were to give us that 30%, then we can cover it. So
that 30%, that'd be a little techy because I believe in a board bill, I forget, I think it was Alderman Kennedy's board bill, and that 30% went to general revenue.
That's correct.
Okay.
And committee, I may be misunderstanding this, but I don't know how, and I'll talk to Jimmy Evans, and Judge Jimmy Evans said he's in my corner, but how do they get to cut this thing up where they can actually get money to help them with their operation, with the jail operations? Their 70% is helping them with the jail operation, and that's all I'm saying, that if I could get a cut, it would help me with the sheriff's operation. I wouldn't be asking you for money for post-certification. That would be it right there. More than enough. If I could get a cut out of that some kind of way. I don't know how all that's working.
And Alderman, I just say this, if the sheriff decided tomorrow that we couldn't continue, and he stops it, the U.S. Marshals will pull every one of their prisoners out of our jail and move them somewhere else because they had pen and paper in hand ready to do that the last time when we kind of had a conversation with them about this whole situation.
So I know the city would lose. Just so. Now, of course, I know you don't supervise the jails directly, which is odd. But how much are we getting from the U.S. Marshals for housing federal prisoners? Do you know? Would you have like a rough estimate?
Yeah, we did
about 2.5.
They said that by the end of the fiscal year, by the end of June, we should have collected about $250.
No, 2.5.
I'm sorry, $2.5 million from the feds for housing and transporting these federal prisoners.
And that does.
Is that going to you or is that going to the Division of Corrections?
70% is their cut, 30% comes to general revenue.
Well, how many prisoners are on that category?
And just so you Alderman Warden know, that we have one person right now that requires dialysis 3 days a week, that's a federal prisoner.
It has to go.
That has to go. That takes one of our crew people, one of our 6 crew, well, 5 crews. 5 people, we have 5 crews, 10 people in transportation. Takes one of them out of operation. One sits in the jail. That leaves 3 to go from out of state, penitentiary, and to courts. That's it. That person is dedicated to that person for at least 6 to 7 hours. And the other day we just had a situation where he had to go from dialysis to Barnes Hospital because his fistula in his arm where they hook up to him would not stop bleeding, and he was going to bleed out there at the dialysis center. So that created them here until I think they said about 8 o'clock that night, and he got off the dialysis machine at like 2:30.
And what the impact is, Mr. Chairman, is that if we have prisoners at the workhouse that have to be transported down or transported out of the courtrooms back out there, all of that's delayed because we don't have enough people.
Because of the federal program.
Yeah.
Okay.
So it's a catch-22.
All right. Alderman Muhammad, any more questions?
No questions, Mr. Chairman. Thank you,
sir. Alderman Oldenburg, any questions of the Sheriff's Department?
Just a few, Sheriff. Thanks for coming in. I took a look at the recent city audit for your department by Nicole Galloway. She released findings and recommendations at the end of December. And first, I want to commend your office because it looks like you complied with all of her findings.
Yes, sir.
And you've implemented policies and procedures that were not there before.
Yes, sir.
Some of the most alarming ones were inventory of guns, which deputies were qualified to carry firearms and which ones were not. It looks like that you tied a bow on that in terms of security and safety. So I recommend, congratulations on that. Thank you. Some other ones that look like time cards were an issue. Some folks not working a full 40-hour week. But again, you put a time system in place as well as and a policy around sick leave and others. So I commend you on that.
Thank you, sir.
By all means. I just have one real quick question after that. Which is the post-certification.
Yes, sir.
The $150,000, that's a one-time shot?
No, sir.
Okay.
I'm sorry. That $150,000 is going to help us get the first 20 deputies through post-certification. Okay. That process will go on for about 3, maybe 4 years until we get the majority of all those folks post-certified. But once we hit that point, then we're done.
So $150,000 covers 20 deputies, and the education and training component, which looks like is an outside kind of contractual arrangement. A vendor comes in, post-certifies 20 deputies.
Yes, sir.
And then after a 3 or 4 year span, you do it again until you.
No, after the 3 or 4 years, we're done.
Oh, you get them all done.
We get them all done, and we're done. We have a post-certified sheriff department. Notwithstanding, we are now the only sheriff department in the state of Missouri that's not post-certified, maybe the only one in the country. And you're listening to the only sheriff out of 114, only sheriff that's not post-certified in this doggone state.
Got it. Okay. So I want to make sure I'm not trying to be daft here. The $150,000 covers all of your deputies.
It would cover 20 of them.
20 each year. First round.
20 at a time.
First round.
So next year he'd be asking for another 150.
That's right.
Find another funding
He just
source.
needs the budget.
So we're looking at $600,000, $700,000 over 4 periods.
But Joe, once we start that process though, now I think we're eligible for grants and stuff. So that might withdraw.
So there's a numerical percentage of sheriffs. Once you have a certain number post-certified, you can qualify for certain grants, is what you're saying.
Yes, sir.
So if it's 30%, 40% of your staff is then post-certified,
yes, sir.
You can qualify.
Yeah, that's right.
Right.
I'd like to get the exact numbers on that if that's available.
Yes.
Please have that distributed.
That'd be great.
Right.
I have no further questions. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Thank you very much. Alderman Boyd's not present, so Alderman Clark Hubbard, any questions of the Sheriff's Department?
No questions, thank you.
Thank you.
All right. It seems to, so you're talking about 2.5,750,000 goes to the general revenue from the federal program, and 1.7 goes to the corrections department. Okay, and I believe if you wanted to change that percentage, Alderman Muhammad's not here longer, that he should look into doing a board bill. I don't know if any of us can see if that's possible or not. We'll meet with our clerk post-sponsor of the president legislation intact to see what's going on. I appreciate all your time, Sheriff, and all your hard work, gentlemen. I appreciate your presentation. We're going to take all of this. We had hoped to have our cut and paste meeting next Tuesday, but one of the offices is not showing up today, so we will have to have another meeting possibly with them, and we'll sit down and start cutting the pie up, or rearranging the pie is what we do. It's like grandma put the pie on the plate and you don't like this piece, so we got to push it over here and get the piece of the blueberry you want, not the piece of the apple, is what we get to do. So, but I appreciate your time and all your efforts.
We appreciate you all giving us the privilege. You have my older person is sitting in the room who does a great job in the 5th Ward. You all know.
That's the first I've ever heard you say.
And it's on tape.
Remember that.
It's recorded.
We're trying to get something to be. No, she is doing. Of course, everybody knows that we have that great project going on in the 5th Ward, the NGA, and I'm excited to death, and I'm just happy that our older woman is leading that fight. And I thank all of you all. I know you're doing stuff all across the city, and you have the backing of this citizen and all that you do. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. Okay, members, if we still stay constant, we have to take up another matter. The Circuit Attorney's Office claimed that they were not aware that they were being called in today. I have a copy of a letter I believe you all have in front of you, dated August 15th, stating that this is going to be their hearing today. May 15th, I'm sorry. I'm not here since too long. So I'm asking, because we do have to do our cut and paste meeting sometime next week. So we have the holiday weekend. If it's amenable to you, if the Circuit Attorney's Office will be available to us sometime next Tuesday afternoon, if that works for, I don't know, I'll check and see what their schedule is, but today is the 21st, so that would be the 28th. I don't know if they're available. I think somewhere in an email they said only the 31st, but I'll ask the committee here to look at your schedule next week. If you have any other hearings with any other boards.
You said the 28th?
That would be next Tuesday, which works the best for most of my scheduling. But
I'm free.
Okay. But if there's a day that I don't know what the other meetings are, we'll find out, because our hearing is our board meeting is Thursday morning, not Friday morning this week. We have the public hearing Thursday evening, and then we have the holiday weekend. And then we'll be back on Tuesday. So check your schedule. Let me know by Thursday's meeting, so I can make any announcements if there's conflict. All right. I appreciate that. Without the circuit attorneys here, I'm hopefully that they'll have a better filing system and be able to look at our mail and know that maybe it's amongst all the letters from the lawyers and maybe they can see it. But we will then adjourn the meeting of.
Are they available next Tuesday?
Well, I don't know. I am going to read through a letter and we'll see. Okay. We have no resolutions for review. We have no committee discussions. Announcements. We just made the announcement that we have been. Apparently, they did not know or get their mail from us. So with that, I will make a motion to adjourn.
You would entertain it or make
I am entertaining today.
Oh, I'd like to move that we adjourn.
Good. All right. We'll adjourn the meeting. Before you leave.